Today, we're going to dig deeper into the wider cultural impact of soft synths in particular, a little bit about the history of the role that native instruments have played in this. And I'm joined by two people who know a lot more about this than I do. We have senior product designer for native instruments, Eric Mueller,
Hello.
and the producer and DJ that actually restored my faith in dance music about 5 or 6 years ago, Nikki Nair.
Hello.
So one of the things we really want to get into here is that, like, I think for me, these instruments don't just make new sounds, they change what the future sounds like. But we're going to get into that a little bit later. But first, could you briefly, both of you, discuss how your journey into production came about?
I started, I guess, making music when I was pretty young, like in how old, 10 or 11 or something. And I found cracked software and Aphex Twin and all of that kind of led to me becoming a music producer. That's the very short version, which is, I guess, everyone's story almost.
I like the short version. Yeah, for me it was also, I just had some friends that were in a band and I got a sampler and my first microcork, I think, and I just recorded field stuff, and I was trying to play those samples in a metal band. Like we were like math core kind of kids, and playing with those samples got me into DJing parties, promoting, and then eventually to native instruments.
And how did that journey actually start when you started designing software rather than coming from the analog world and then designing software?
I mean, the software design for me personally was, I'm at Native since 14 years and I started as product specialist for Traktor. So I was going around helping all DJs at events like ADE to set up certain stuff. We had like special Traktor versions that would sync with light equipment and all that. And we would develop these versions, or I would create certain mappings for their controllers. And I would always get feedback about products, but the feedback was about products that were already released. And so I was in marketing back then. So I would bring all this feedback back to product design. And they basically said, yeah, we can't do anything about it because it's already out. So that was kind of frustrating, but this also got me into this journey of like market research and then user research. And then from that, taking that step to actually designing stuff.
And Nikki, were you a producer before you were a DJ?
Yeah, I was. Yeah, I wasn't making dance music really before I started DJing. I was just making kind of whatever I wanted. And then when I started DJing, it kind of gave my productions dance music structure.
It would be good to go a little bit into your process. Like, I'm sure it's evolved loads in the years since you've started it. But like, yeah, could you explain a little bit about how you build tracks now, and how that's evolved from the equipment that maybe you used at the beginning of the journey to the equipment you're using now, or the tools that you're using now?
Yeah, I think when I maybe the thing I didn't mention about when I started making music was I also was playing instruments, and that was a big part of production for me. And one of the things I did as a kid was use tape recorders and then record the audio from the tape into the computer. I think still and throughout my whole production process, having parts of the audio that leaves a computer and goes like into the world and then comes back into the computer, that's really important to me. So in all of my tracks, I'll always have something like that. Sometimes it's just mixing everything through like an analog mixer. And even if it's mixing a bunch of software instruments, I'll like add all the distortion from the mixer and then have it back in. And sometimes it's playing instruments or real synthesizers or reamping things through like a guitar amp with a mic. I think that's maybe the salient feature of all of my music.
I think that level of creativity that we associate with like standard instrumentation or the analog world, sometimes is seen as opposed to creation with digital music tools. But I'm wondering, because you mentioned you also come from like a metal background, how you're aware of these kind of patches or or journeys when you're designing a new piece of software? Like, are these instruments, are these tools designed with a will to be able to integrate into a larger production cycle?
I mean, that's a tough one, right?
Mm.
Because we do have so many soft synths that basically just are skeuomorphic designs and try to replicate the real thing. And for me, the only reason why I would use a real synth is the haptic interaction with the knobs and being able to turn like multiple at the same time. And if you're like a finger artist, you can like turn like 8 knobs at the same time and you just like go over it and you create stuff that you can't create with software. And I think trying to recreate that in software will always lead to this comparison that it doesn't really feel like it should and that the real thing is better. But I think a lot of UIs, a lot of UX goes into a direction where, like, I don't think we have started yet to use the computer as a potential. You know, like we still think about like, I don't know, we look at our desktop and we call it desktop because an office company invented the desktop and we use folders and files and we all have these like comparison to real world boring office terminology in computers everywhere. And I think that's also still the case for a lot of music instruments. And I think we need to kind of think about what can the computer give us user interface wise that is not in the real world, and then play with that to really like let somebody explore stuff without explaining too much, or you know, getting away from concepts that are trying to replicate a filter and a VCO and just having these same knobs. Like, couldn't we make something that is graphical and you explore this and yeah, you dive deep into something and create sounds in a way that feels way more natural in that computer environment?
Before getting on to like the UX and how that shapes how you actually use the instruments, I'm interested in, again, are the tools that you work on like massive designed specifically to be able to do things that cannot be created with analog or traditional synthesis, analog or modular synthesis? And is that front of mind when you're developing these tools?
They all rely on like synthesizers, but of course with software you can just add another oscillator on top and be like, if you have the compute power, you can just like add stuff. You had like 100 effects. I don't know, you could replicate this in real life, but I think the design is more like, yeah, what can we get out of it with DSP? And also thinking of Massive, I mean, it's a good example because if you look at Massive X, at least it's a very complicated synth and it's not like the best in how it tells the user what's happening. And we just released this Massive X player with that morphing XY pad kind of thing in the middle that is really, really expressive and is really fast to set up. And it just allows the user to explore sounds quite quickly without knowing too much of synthesis.
I also wanted to ask something to you, Nikki. Is there such a thing as too much? Like when you're approaching productions, do you like deliberately strip things down, or yeah?
Yeah. I mean, I think this is also a matter of taste and whose art it is. I think for me, like I just like when there's less stuff going on, where I can kind of. I mean, part of it is like I will get fed up with a project file. If it has too many channels, I'm going to close it and never open it again. I hate that. It's just there needs to be like 8 channels, and that's plenty. That's too much still. And usually most of my tracks I'll like mix down to just 2 channels, and I won't touch it after that, and it's done. But back to what you were saying about like having. There is so much stuff you can only do in digital that you can't do in the real world. And I think that my favorite soft synths are usually the ones that like don't have any kind of outboard equivalent. Not like in Native Instruments has Razor. Razor is crazy. It doesn't sound like anything. I really like that. FM8 is similar, where like the great part about FM8 is you can get really painful high frequencies out of it if you set the settings weird, and it's like no guardrails in that synth, and that's what's cool about it.
That feels like a good lead to another thing I wanted to talk about as well, which is the importance of creating stuff that's just nobody has heard before. You know, I wondered to get into this, was there a particular sound or track that it's a question for both of you as well, that you heard when you were young and you were just like, I have no idea how this was made, but I love it and it's, you know, inspiring me?
I think I really like the Brahms sounds from horror movies. It's like the thing that always gets me. And I'm like, I want to have this in every track I make. It's just
I saw this question on the thing and I kept trying to think about it, but I don't know if I had a great answer. I feel like sometimes if I'm dreaming, I will have like weird sounds or lack of sounds in the dream that like I feel like I need to make into reality, but I've never succeeded at any of that.
I mean, I'm sure we could get into the idea of perfection, you know, like in how when you're trying to produce something, it's never quite what is in your head. Have you ever got to points where you're just like, yes, this is actually 100% what I wanted to create?
I don't think I'm a perfectionist in that way. I think so usually if I've released a track, I'm happy with it. I think. Yeah.
Is it important for you as a musician who's playing their music out in front of audiences to create something that you feel is different or is shocking or dislocates or creates some kind of reaction?
Definitely. Yeah. I think if at least if I don't get a few people who absolutely hate what I did, like with any release, then I won't be happy. There needs to be almost an equal number of people who hate it and people who like it. That's how I know it's good.
100% agree. Yeah.
I really think there's like a whole topic about accessibility that I think I'll find my way to somehow. But yeah, Eric, I mean, who are you designing these tools for? When you're like working on it, like who's the audience?
Just me. No, I mean it depends, right? Native Instruments has so many users, and we had done so many studies on what kind of users do we have and how do we categorize them. And I always love to talk to users and figure out like, what is your workflow? How do you work? What's important for you? What does annoy you? Why does it annoy you? A lot of times we just set somebody in the room and we watch what are they doing, why are they struggling, and we record those sessions. And then we try to figure out like, what are the problems we're trying to solve for these users. In the end, of course, there are ideas where I'm just like, I want to have this as a user. But sometimes we also do stuff where I'm like, that's not for me, but it makes total sense for this type of producer. You know, I think a really good instrument is really good for all of them. But I think it's really hard to do because you will always have somebody who says this is too complex or this is too simple, and finding the balance there is quite interesting actually as a problem. But I think we are designing stuff for everyone in different ways. You know, like just look at what you have in Contact, where you have super complex sampled libraries that just give you so much articulation control over whole orchestras and stuff like this. But then we also have something like Leap, which is basically you hold one key on the keyboard and you just get loops that are perfectly synced with each other and they sound nice, and you can just, you know, tune them to a global scale and everything falls in place. So I guess, yeah. Personally, I also try to just get my needs met as a producer.
I mean, that would be really interesting, like to hear, you know, from in your own productions, are the specific uses of the tools that you've worked on that help you create your vision. I know we were talking before about how a lot of your music is very dark, and it feels like there's a chicken and egg situation where like the product is very, it's especially massive, and these soft synths are very much suited to kind of dark, weird noises. And like, yeah, if you can get into your workflow.
For my need, like I'm using Massive X so much since I started working on it. To be honest, I didn't know how it worked before, and then when we had to start designing around it, I had to learn everything about it, and then that made me really want to use it. Because yeah, you're right, it sounds quite dark, but I also think, and yeah, you're gonna say this, he has to say it because he's from Native, but I think it's one of the best sounding synthesizers out there. It's just not the most user friendly at times. I think we are kind of trying to tackle that in the future to make that better. But I think it's super versatile. And, I build like my whole drums, like what you said, I want to limit myself to 8 tracks. I like to limit myself to like 3 tools that I use as source. So it's more like a band, it sounds all kind of coming from the same place.
When it comes to the design of the interfaces, because obviously you do a lot on UX, are you consciously aware of like enabling people to create in an easy way? I suffer with menu diving on some, I can't mention the brand, on other equipment that I have, and it drives me absolutely insane because I just think you have great potential, but no, like the work, I don't have time to invest into memorizing all of the like menu routes. I mean, does that play into how you design UX?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, we also do data tracking, right? So we figure out that a lot of users, when we talk to them, I would say 60% say, I don't use presets. If you look at the data, how people use our stuff, we see that 80% are using presets. Then we have tweakers, like light tweakers, we call them, that they'll touch a knob up to 10 times in a soft synth. And then we have like 5% that actually touch a knob more than 100 times, like the sound designers, the actual builders. And that's quite telling because it tells us one thing: we need those complex instruments to be able to create really good sounding patches that people can use. So if we don't make it complex for the pros that create patches, we cannot create amazing presets for people that predominantly use presets. So that kind of gets in, then we talk about it in like all this business stuff on the business side on Native, and we see like these numbers. We're like, oh, why do we make such a expensive, complicated instrument if we have 80% of users that are using only presets, And then you have to tell them, like, it's not like we wouldn't have these 80% preset users if we wouldn't have an instrument that was really complex and sounds really amazing and gives sound designers the ability to create. And what you're saying with this menu diving and stuff, there's always this fine balance. Do we want to show everything in one page, which I personally like a lot because you see everything, but it also makes everything very complex. Let me try to explain it. You just reveal complexity when you need it, and you hide it when you don't. That's kind of the approach that we're trying to go more now.
Nikki, did you know you were being surveilled by Native Instruments?
No, but
You
I
can.
wonder
You
if
have to
they
opt
know
in.
about me. Oh, okay. Who knows? I might have. Yeah, that's crazy. I'm gonna try to like encode messages in my knob movements to see if I can get free stuff.
But how important is it for you to be able to just get hands-on with something, or are you someone who really likes to take the time to understand instruments?
No, I find that like the less I understand about it, the more crazy stuff I'll do. So usually the first like day I have a synth, I will like start messing with it and it will come to some crazy sound and I'll be able to use it. And then usually once I like really get to know it, I'm not able to do anything that surprising anymore. That's not all synthesizers. I feel like there are some that kind of uh keep delivering. But yeah, I'm not really the deepest synthesis person. I feel like I'm usually just looking to get chaos out of a thing as fast as possible.
Yeah, I like that. When you get a new synth, I always hit record and then I try to explore it and I record the whole exploration and like, that sounds cool. How did I do that? Yeah, that's the way. Yeah.
One of the things I wanted to talk about, which is kind of nerdy and geeky, but this famous Mark Fisher quote, which is like, if you played music from the 60s to someone in the 90s, or if you played music from the 90s to someone in the 1960s, they would not know what was going on. But if you played music now, if you played music from the 90s now to someone in the 2010s, they would understand it all perfectly. And the idea that like nothing is being created necessarily, the idea from that is that everything is just a rehash of what's going on before. Do you feel there's like a reliance on nostalgia or kind of rote sounds in the dance music space?
Yes and no. I mean, I think part of it is like we're still in the first like a little over 100 years of recorded music. I think dance music is the first genre that maybe is entirely reliant on recordings. Like there's not non-recorded dance music. It is the recording. Like dance records aren't like with a rock record, the record is actually a recording of the actual rock music, which is the thing that the band was playing. But with dance music, the record is the whole thing. And it is all like a record referencing another record is the same as someone stealing a riff from another band. So I don't think that's like bad, but I do think it gets like boring. And sometimes, especially now, I think it's really easy to just rip people off and use a loop pack and make something that sounds approximately like the thing that you like. And a lot of those records get made. And I think I mean, I shouldn't hate on them. I don't know, but like it can be kind of boring.
When was the last time you heard something that you were like, oh my God, this actually, I have no idea. I have no idea how this was made, or this is something that feels brand new. And where is that music coming from if you're hearing it? Like within dance music, maybe. But
I think last time I met you, I think I said this at a thing that you had also facilitated. There's that guy Word Color who's doing really crazy stuff. And I'm sure there's a bunch of other stuff I haven't heard that is also great. I mean, I think like on a longer time scale, I feel like the last really big innovator was Sophie. And a lot of music we're hearing now is just post Sophie music. And I don't think the next person has come who like, I feel like before that it was like Aphex Twin or something.
I mean, can we just do another hour talking about Sophie? I'd be really happy about that. I mean, but I guess things don't happen in isolation, and I think Sophie's innovations are very much about understanding like the wider cultural context of the music that they were creating, right? In a way.
I mean, that and sound design. I mean, there's both sides of it. Yeah, she was like definitely an iconic person, but like the sound design is insane. And everyone tried to sound like her after that, I think.
And Eric, is like are you creating these tools with that in mind, with, I don't know, potential Sophies?
I think we definitely want to have a tool at some point that is like the original Massive, which created this whole dubstep sound that we all got to know, when it came out. And I think that's definitely what we're striving for, because that's the best compliment that you can get, is when you created something that shapes something completely new. And I also think that looking at the future and looking at like what is going to come within the next few years, we have this whole story about like synthesizers being like a strong suit for native, and there will be some synthesizers that will be quite different coming out. They will and feel different than stuff that we've done before, and maybe they can spark some craziness or some trash.
Yeah. Hopefully the takeaway is that, Native Instruments obviously played a significant role in creating the sound of now, for good and for bad, apparently, because, and
I think it's good.
Yeah.
It's good. Don't worry. It's good.
And is continuing to, create tools that allow people to just push the envelope out and create something that we've never heard before. And we look forward to learning and hearing what that sounds like through people like Nikki using it.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank
you.
you.